Then Ben told Werdo that he wanted to marry Eliza, and this statement somewhat surprised Werdo. Werdo's reaction: Ben believed that Werdo was dissatisfied with something, to which Werdo said that he simply did not expect to hear something like that from Ben. Werdo also told Ben that Eliza said that weak guys like Ben were not her type at all, and he told Ben that he should give up this dream. However, Ben was not deterred by the fact that he was much weaker than Werdo, and he decided that from that day on, he would train hard and work on his sword skills. Soon, Ben actually began to train hard, and every day his fencing skills actually became better. Every day Ben became stronger, and his number of victories over Werdo increased. Ben soon became strong enough to have more victories than Werdo, and he hoped that he now had a chance to be together with Eliza. Eliza soon joined Ben and Werdo in training, at which point Werdo said that he would no longer be able to train any time soon, and Eliza did not understand why Werdo decided not to train anymore. Werdo believed that if he came up with a compelling justification for his decision, then Ben and Eliza would consider him a weakling. Then Werdo said that in addition to training, he must also deal with various government affairs, after which Werdo went home. Returning to the palace, Leonard Werdo, who at that time was the current count and Werdo's father, was dissatisfied that his son could not defeat such a commoner as Ben. Werdo, resigned to his defeat, told his father that he had no talent for fencing and that he no longer wanted to train. This statement only angered Leonard more, and in a fit of anger he threw his wine cup towards his son. At that moment, Leonard looked at his son with a feeling of shame for him and thought that his only one was so mediocre. At this moment, Werdo felt very ashamed in front of his father, and then he asked him for forgiveness, after which he left the palace. Meanwhile, it was raining heavily outside, and Werdo sat on the edge of the fortress wall, thinking about what to do next. At that moment, someone climbed onto the wall and told Werdo that if he continued to sit here, sooner or later he would catch a cold, to which Werdo said that he would be fine. This person who climbed the wall turned out to be Eliza, and she again told Werdo that he should take shelter from the rain as soon as possible. Eliza also noticed the sad tone with which Werdo spoke to her, and she understood that Werdo had some problems. Eliza decided that it was impossible to leave Werdo in this state, after which she dragged Werdo along with her. Soon, Werdo and Eliza began to walk through the streets of the county, and Werdo did nothing but look at Eliza. At one point, Werdo noticed that Eliza was constantly smiling, and he believed that this was because Eliza liked to see and date him. At this moment, Werdo was thinking that maybe Eliza didn't like Ben, and that she wanted to be with Werdo. Then Werdo came to the conclusion that he could love Eliza as a loved one with whom he would like to spend his whole life. The next day, Werdo went back to the training field, where he planned to continue training after all. Before the training, Werdo heard from several people that Ben confessed his feelings to Eliza yesterday. However, Eliza told Ben that she did not want to be with him. At this moment, Werdo thought that if Eliza does not want to be with Ben, then he can try to be with Eliza. Then Werdo thought that perhaps Eliza also had special feelings for him, and then he decided to run to Eliza as soon as possible. On the way to Eliza, Werdo had already begun to imagine how he would confess his feelings to Eliza, and he began to think about what he should say to Eliza. Werdo also believed that even if his father was against Werdo and Eliza being together, he would be willing to give up his title in order to be together with Eliza. Soon Werdo reached the house where Eliza lived, and he was ready to enter the house and confess his feelings to her. However, at one point, Werdo heard strange sounds coming from Eliza's house, and he decided to look out the window to find out what was happening there. A second later, Werdo saw Ben and Eliza standing in an embrace and kissing each other. Werdo couldn't believe what he saw, and he decided that he had to do something urgently. Last night, Ben confessed his feelings to Eliza, but when she rejected him, Ben wasn't going to give up and he wanted to know the reason why Eliza didn't want to be with him. Then Ben reminded Eliza that she herself had said that she liked strong guys, and that he was doing everything possible to become the one with whom she wanted to spend the rest of her life. Ben really didn't want to lose Eliza, and he begged her to think again before turning him down. Suddenly, Eliza raised her hands up, which is why a very large amount of mana began to come out of her body. At this point, Eliza told Ben that since her birth, her body contained a large amount of mana, and over time, the amount of this mana in her body did not stop growing. Mana in the human body, it will gradually begin to destroy the body, and Eliza needed to regularly release excess mana. Due to the fact that the use of mana was strictly prohibited in Weirdo County, Eliza secretly went to a deserted place and released excess mana. Eliza also told Ben that she did not want the person she loved to suffer because of her problems, and therefore she was not ready for a serious relationship. However, Ben did not care about this feature of Eliza, and at that moment Ben walked up to Eliza and hugged her as tightly as possible. Eliza told Ben that he had to let her go as soon as possible, otherwise her mana would go into Ben's body. Then Ben told Eliza that he is the only person in the county who is studying the nature of the mysterious magical energy. Ben also told Eliza that he would definitely do everything possible to help Eliza with her problem in order to live with her all his life. After Ben's promises to help, Eliza told Ben that in this case she was ready to be with him, no matter what, after which she also hugged Ben. Soon, Ben and Eliza began dating, and together they got a dog, which they named Bedorman. At this time, the broken Huerto came every evening to the place where Eliza released her mana. Huerto soon confessed his feelings for Eliza to his father. However, his father called Eliza a witch and said that he was completely against his son and future count dating a witch. Once again, when Eliza was about to release her excess mana, she suddenly became worse, causing her to bleed from her mouth. Ben was very concerned about Eliza's condition and he wanted to help her somehow, but he didn't know what to do. Elise then told Ben that she had recently started to accumulate even more mana in her body, and that things like sudden loss of blood could now happen to her. Ben was afraid that if the mana in Eliza's body continued to grow, then sooner or later he might lose Eliza, and he believed that he urgently had to somehow stop this and heal Eliza. That same day, Ben went to his laboratory and did not leave there for several days to develop a potion that could help heal Eliza. Every day Ben worked harder, and every day he got closer to creating the right drug for Eliza. Ben developed many different drugs, and he tested the effects of each of his drugs on rats to better understand how his drugs worked and which of them could help Eliza. While Ben worked diligently on a potion for Eliza, a drunken and broken Huerto worked up the courage to finally talk to Eliza. Eliza was somewhat displeased that Huerto had come to her in such a state, and Huerto told Eliza that they used to have the same feelings for him as they did for Ben. Huerto also told Eliza about how good they were together, and how much he loved and continues to love her. However, Eliza explained to Huerto that she did not have any serious feelings for him, and she told Huerto that he simply misunderstood everything. After this, Eliza began to release her mana, telling Huerto that even if she had feelings for him, they still would not be destined to be together. Eliza also asked Huerto if he would love a girl like her, who is obliged to use mana, despite the fact that the use of mana is prohibited in the county. Besides, Eliza was somewhat angry at Huerto for pretending that he didn't know about her problem. In response to this, Huerto told Eliza that he was not brave enough to stand up to his father before, and that now he has become brave enough to do so. At one point, Huerto realized that now his actions would not change anything, after which he went back to the palace with tears in his eyes and with severe pain in his soul. Soon the rain stopped falling, causing the county to experience a severe drought. Due to the drought, food fields stopped producing, which could cause people in the county to go hungry. Soon people throughout the county were demanding that Earl Leonard solve the problem of drought and mass starvation as quickly as possible. Leonard looked at the disgruntled residents of the county and showed Huerto how the people would behave if Huerto did not take care of them. At this moment, Leonard was thinking that he was not some kind of higher being who could solve the drought problem right now. Huerto also thought that his father was not capable of solving such problems, and he wanted to know what his father would do in such a situation. Then Leonard told his son that his people did not care why certain problems arose in his county, since the people needed to release their anger and aggression. Then Leonard said that he needed to find someone who could put all the blame on him so that people would stop being angry at the count and start hating another person. Then Huerto asked his father who would become the person to whom it would be possible to shift all the blame for the events taking place. Then Leonard told his son that Eliza, to whom Huerto had confessed his love, would become the person whom the people of the county would hate. A moment later, Leonard grabbed the worried Huerto by the shoulders and began to thank him for helping him choose the perfect victim for his people's aggression. Leonard also told Huerto that because of her magical abilities, people could easily mistake her for a witch who was involved in this drought. However, Huerto was categorically against all the people of the county starting to hate the person he loves. However, Leonard did not want to listen to his son, after which he hit Werdo on the cheek with all his might. Leonard also told his son that he could not entrust the further management of the county to someone who could succumb to feelings. Leonard believed that a man like Werdo could bring a lot of trouble to the county, after which Leonard ordered the guards to lock Werdo in his room and not let him out. However, Werdo could not come to terms with his father's decision, and then, secretly from him, he decided to escape through the window, climbing down a rope and various rags. Werdo thought that if his father could make such decisions in relation to the one his son loved so much, then he could not simply submit to his will. Soon Werdo found himself on the street, and he immediately ran to the place where the knights were going to execute Eliza. Werdo soon reached the place of execution, and he saw two knights dragging Eliza to the place of execution. At that moment, Eliza noticed Werdo, and she began to try to get out of the guard's hands, begging Werdo to help her get out. Eliza's execution began to suspect Werdo of collaborating with the witch. Then the residents of the county began to demand the execution of Werdo, despite the fact that he is the son of Count Leonard and the future ruler. Werdo could not allow the people of the county to recognize and capture him, and then he immediately put on the hood of his cloak so that the people would not recognize him. Werdo's father was able to recognize his son, and he ordered him to stop right now and return to the palace. Meanwhile, Ben also wanted to save Eliza, but he was surrounded by knights, and he could only watch his beloved die before his eyes. However, despite this, Ben still ran to Eliza, having lost his right hand, which was cut off by one of the knights. Ben could not believe that his beloved was dying before his eyes, and at that moment Ben was overcome with intense grief and hatred for the people of the county. Ben did not want to lose Eliza again, and with tears in his eyes, he immediately ran to the place where Eliza's body was supposed to land. However, Yuhan could not allow Ben to escape from him so quickly, and then Yuhan blocked Ben's path. Yuhan then used a one-arm press to prevent Ben from escaping from him again. First, Yuhan grabbed Ben, after which he threw him as far as possible. At the moment of impact, Yuhan noticed that Ben's movements had become much more simple, and that he should disable Ben as soon as possible before he became stronger again. After a couple of seconds, Ben was back on his feet and prepared to arrive at Eliza's as soon as possible. However, Yuhan immediately arrived at Ben and hit him so that he would definitely not be able to escape. Yuhan did not stop beating Ben, and with each passing second it became more and more difficult for Ben to withstand Yuhan's blows. At this moment, Yuhan sat on Ben and began to repeat the pullover exercise to beat Ben with both hands at the same time. Yuhan continued beating Ben until he bled and lost consciousness. After a few hits, Ben could not move, and then Yuhan decided that it was time to deal with the remaining zombies. However, at this moment, Bidorman appeared in front of Yuhan, who was about to use several bone hurricanes. Yuhan believed that Bidorman would now try to stop him, and then he prepared to attack Bidorman. However, instead of attacking Yuhan, Bidorman used his bone hurricanes to take Ben and take him to safety. Despite the fact that Bidorman fought on Ben's side, Yuhan was pleased to see how the faithful dog was trying to protect his beloved master. Meanwhile, the rest of the bone hurricanes captured the rest of Ben's teammates, including Eliza, and the bone hurricanes were heading to safety. Rain watched as Bidorman's bone hurricanes carried away the body of the defeated Elisa. Rain believed that she should not continue the battle against the defeated opponent, and she did not care that she could not finish off Eliza. Count Weirdo watched as the bone hurricanes carried away Ben and his companions, and he believed that they should not just let Ben go. Count Weirdo believed that if Ben survived, he would return again to take revenge, and then Count Weirdo told Rain to go after the bone hurricanes. However, instead of following the bone hurricanes, Rain headed towards the fortress wall, threatening Count Weirdo with cruel reprisals. At this moment, Count Weirdo looked at Rain and tried to understand why she was running in his direction. At that moment, Rain almost reached the fortress wall, and she demanded that Count Weirdo explain to her what he had done to her Aunt Ryan. At that moment, Count Weirdo realized that Rain wanted to kill him, and then he began to run away as quickly as possible, after which he ordered everyone to grab Rain and prevent her from finishing him off. Rumi was very disappointed that Count Weirdo began to run away again, and she decided that Count Weirdo would never get rid of this shameful habit. Meanwhile, Rain had almost reached the gate, and then Raper and Hender tried to block her path. Raper and Hender told Rain that if she didn't stop, they would be forced to use force against her. However, Rain was confident that Raper and Hender could not stop her, and then Raper and Hender tried to attack Rain. In fact, Raper and Hinder themselves understood that they were unlikely to be able to stop Rain, but they believed that they should still follow Count Wordo's order to the very end. At that moment when Raper and Hinder tried to stop Rain with their swords, Rain jumped and landed on the swords of Raper and Hinder. While Rain stood on the swords of Raper and Hinder, she began to straighten her spine in the shape of the letter C, so that she could then make an even higher jump. Rain was able to jump high enough to avoid the battle with Reaper and Hinder and to jump to the observation deck of the fortress wall, from where Count Wordo escaped. When Rain jumped to the observation deck, Rumi was already waiting for her, who was going to stop Rain. At this point, Rumi prepared to attack Rain with her sword, telling Rain that she would not allow anyone to harm the Count. However, it was enough for Rain to hit Rumi on the head with the hilt of her blade, after which Rumi immediately fell to the ground unconscious. At the same moment, Blog also tried to stop Rain, but Rain easily dodged the slightly clumsy Blog. When Rain landed on the edge of the observation deck, Blog told her that she should stop and not do anything stupid that she would probably regret later. However, at this moment, Rain told Blog that since their last meeting, Blog had become not only even more beautiful, but also stronger. Rain also told Blog that even though he has become much stronger, his attacks are still as slow as before. At this moment, Rain jumped down from the observation deck, while Blog began to doubt that Yuhan's training had made him stronger. A couple of seconds later, Rain saw Count Wordo again, and she told him that he would be responsible for the fall and ruin of her family, and Count Wordo immediately began to ask Rain for forgiveness. However, Rain did not need Count Wordo's apology, and she only wanted to kill Count Wordo. Rain was very close to finally killing Count Wordo, but something stopped her, and Count Wordo was still alive. At this moment, Count Wordo was glad that Yuhan managed to arrive in time to stop Rain. However, despite the fact that Rain could not get closer to Count Wordo, she could still throw her blade at Count Wordo, and at that moment, Count Wordo believed that nothing could save him. At the same moment, Yuhan began to repeat the same exercise that he had used to defeat Ben in order to also effectively stop Rain. Yuhan repeated this exercise 10 times, which made it seem like Rain might not survive such blows. After Yuhan stopped attacking Rain, he remembered that his blows were too strong, as he had repeated this exercise with a stronger opponent a few minutes earlier. At this moment, Yuhan was afraid that he might have accidentally killed Rain, but Count Wordo told Yuhan that the county's warriors were very strong, and that Rain would be fine. Soon Rain began to move, from which Count Wordo concluded that Rain was alive, and he believed that she needed to rest a little to regain her strength. Soon Rain came to her senses, but when Rain woke up, she noticed that she was in a place unfamiliar to her. Rain was lying in a bed, next to which there was a window, a table with food, a mirror and a young boy, from whom Rain decided to find out where she was now. The boy told Rain that she was now in one of the rooms of Count Wordo's fortress, and Yuhan asked this boy to look after Lady Rain. Rain wanted to know from the boy where Count Wordo was now, but she was sure that this boy would not tell him where Count Wordo was now. However, the boy not only told Rain that Count Wordo had now gone to train with Yuhan, but also even offered Rain to accompany her to the training place, which somewhat surprised Rain. Rain was amazed at the boy's politeness, and she told him that she really needed to get to Count Wordo. Soon, Rain and the boy began to climb a high cliff, on which, according to the boy, Count Wordo trained with Yuhan. Rain still couldn't believe that this boy was actually leading the would-be assassin of Count Wordo straight to Count Wordo himself, and at one point the boy began to see Count Wordo training. Soon Rain and the boys climbed to the very top of the cliff, and there they actually saw Count Wordo, who was training with Yuhan. At that moment, Rain saw in front of her the exhausted Count Wordo, who begged Rain to kill him right now in order to finally end his torment. The fact is that Yuhan tied Count Wordo to the cart in such a way that the Count had to drive the cart behind which Yuhan was sitting. At this moment, Yuhan was happy that Count Wordo was finally training with him, and at this moment, the formation of Yuhan's new ability began. During the training, Yuhan gained the skill of coaching consciousness, which was combined with the skill of composure. Then Yuhan told Count Wordo that if he liked the training so much, then they should increase the load. Due to being treated so harshly by Count Wordo during training, Yuhan began to form an epic crazy trainer skill. Count Wordo found it difficult to continue training, and then he again asked Rain to kill him. However, Rain was extremely pleased to watch the torment of Count Wordo, and she refused to kill him. Meanwhile, a group of ghouls also joined Yuhan and Count Werdo's training. After the training, Count Werdo returned to his palace, where he was going to hold a meeting with Yuhan, Rain, the old ghoul lord, and several knights. After Count Werdo was satisfied that all the important people had gathered, Count Werdo announced the start of the meeting. After this, Count Werdo's assistant decided to first report that they had lost a lot of representatives of the county's entourage during the invasion of the zombie army. Due to a lack of military strength, the decision was made to bring Commander Ryan back from exile, but she refused to return to the county due to her personal affairs. After this, Count's assistant Werdo asked the Count what he planned to do with the vacant position of commander of Ryan. Earl Werdo said that he would like to give the place to Raper and Hendard and give them the titles of heroes of the county. The knights thought it was a really good idea to put 2 county heroes in place of commanders at once. The Count's assistant went on to say that in recent days the number of county residents who come to the training field to practice bodybuilding has increased. In this regard, the Count's assistant suggested entrusting the training of the residents to those warriors who had already trained with Yuhan before the invasion of Ben's army. However, it took some time to form a group of bodybuilding trainers, and then the decision was made to install Yuhan's ghouls as temporary trainers. Count Werdo said that this was indeed good news, after which Count Werdo thanked Yuhan for helping the county fight off Ben Ai's army. However, in response to Count Werdo's gratitude, Yuhan stood up from his seat and began to approach where Count Werdo was sitting. With every second, Yuhan's gaze became more and more sinister, which very much frightened Count Werdo himself. A second later, Yuhan grabbed Count Werdo and broke the chair behind which Count Werdo was sitting. Werdo's guards decided that Yuhan wanted to harm Count Werdo, and Count Werdo tried to understand what he did to make Yuhan do so. Then Yuhan explained to Count Werdo that he should do the same as his ghouls. Before the meeting began, Yuhan ordered his ghouls to sit without chairs to strengthen their leg muscles. One of the knights believed that Count Werdo was in danger from Yuhan, but Count Werdo asked the knight to put away his spear and explained that he was not in danger. At this moment, Yuhan suggested that the assembled knights also try to sit without chairs, using only the strength of their legs, but the knights politely refused Yuhan's offer. At this moment, Count Werdo felt very ashamed and embarrassed that he was the only one who had to sit without a chair. Within a couple of seconds, Count Werdo began to experience unbearable pain in his legs, and then he asked his assistant to list all the news from this meeting to him as soon as possible. Werdo's assistant said that the next news is related to Rain and her attempt to assassinate Count Werdo. The assistant also said that due to the turbulent situation in the county and the good intentions of Count Werdo himself, Rain would only receive a slightly reduced sentence. As a punishment for Rain, the Count's assistant proposed to deprive Rain of Count Werdo's citizenship. Then Count Werdo told Rain that if she still only feels negative emotions towards him, then he gives her every right to kill her. Werdo in bewilderment, and tried to understand why Count Werdo gave Rain every right to commit her own assassination attempt. The fact is that it became so difficult for Count Werdo to sit without his chair that he decided that it would be easier for him to die than to continue to be in this position. However, Rain fully understood why Count Werdo personally asked to kill him, and then she refused to kill the Count. In response to the refusal, Count Werdo began to say that such an irresponsible ruler like him did not deserve the right to life. Also, Count Werdo said that except for Rain, any person has every right to judge him. Then Yuhan thought that if Count Werdo really wanted to stop ruling the county, he could devote all his time exclusively to training. At this point, the knights believed that if Count Werdo actually ended his reign, they would have the chance to become the new rulers of the county. The knights also believed that Count Werdo had an extremely low military, and the knights could easily gain the right to own and rule the state. Yuhan also told Count Werdo that he was simply amazed at how Count Werdo supported newcomers to bodybuilding. After that, Yuhan took off his t-shirt and told the Count that he would definitely help Count Werdo improve his body, no matter which knight became the new ruler. Count Werdo was tired of enduring the disgrace that was now happening, and then he asked his assistant to move on to the next point of their meeting today. After Count Werdo announced the end of the meeting, he promised Yuhan to make new training simulators. However, some of the simulators the county strength could not make, and then Bejimos, who is the spirit and king of the earth, can help Yuhan in obtaining new simulators. Now the problem was that no one knew where to look for Bejimos, but Rain told Yuhan that she was very good friends with many spirits. Rain told Yuhan that during the time she lived in the elven forest and learned lates, she also learned to communicate with spirits. Yuhan was very happy that Rain could communicate with spirits, and he began to beg her to help him find Begimos. Rain told Yuhan that she could help him, but first Rain asked Yuhan to help her take revenge. At this point, the Count believed that Rain was talking about him, and he reminded her that she still has the right to kill him right now. However, Rain said that she was not talking about Count Werdo. Rain told Yuhan that she wanted to take revenge on the Illuminati, a clan of dark magicians, because of whom her family fell. Meanwhile, he was in one of the caves, in which he told several monsters that his plan to capture the county had failed. Ben also said that next time he would take everything into account in his plan, and that next time he would do his best to avoid making mistakes. At this moment, there were also two monsters in the cave, the first of which looked like an antique porcelain doll, while the second monster looked like a creepy scarecrow with a scythe. The doll told Ben that they were very disappointed with him, and she also said that it was good that Eliza was no more. These words made Ben very angry, and then he injected another strength-increasing drug into his arm to deal with the doll. However, the doll and the scarecrow were not going to forgive Ben for his hot-tempered behavior, and then they decided to try to fight back. Soon a real battle began between Ben, the doll and the scarecrow, in which the scarecrow began to protect the doll from Ben. Ben was very angry with the doll and he promised it that he would definitely kill it. At this point, the doll just jumped to the side and found Ben's anger towards her to be quite cute. The doll then told Ben that if he really tried to kill her, then she would do everything possible to finish Eliza off. After these words, Ben became even angrier, and then he injected several more syringes with an enhancing drug into his body. Ben's blow was so strong that he literally crushed the doll and the stuffed animal into a cake. However, despite this, the doll and the stuffed animal were still alive, and the doll felt that what Ben did to them could be considered a betrayal. Then the doll told Ben that as punishment they would tell about his betrayal to a certain creature who could definitely get rid of Ben. Ben thought that the doll and the stuffed animal would really tell everything about him, and then he tried to crush them with even greater force. However, the doll and the scarecrow managed to escape before he could strike, and he was afraid that if they told the creature about his betrayal, he would definitely not be able to save Eliza. Meanwhile, the doll and the scarecrow had already escaped from the cave, and they began to discuss with each other how the creature would punish Ben for his betrayal. The doll also remembered Ben's diary, which contained information about all of Ben's drugs, and she and the stuffed animal decided that they should take him away as soon as possible. However, after a couple of seconds the doll and the stuffed animal stopped and heard someone tell them that they would not receive this diary. After this, a mysterious silhouette appeared in the sky, from which a piercing blade flew towards the doll and the stuffed animal. Soon the doll and the stuffed animal were surrounded by a bright light, during which the doll and the stuffed animal were disoriented. Before the doll and the scarecrow realized what was happening, Ryan successfully attacked them with her sword and skill. After the effigy's vision returned, he saw that the doll had been decapitated. At this point, the scarecrow became so angry with Ryan that it began to take on a stronger form. After reincarnation, the scarecrow used one of his fighting skills, the Song of the Rotten Forest, under the influence of which any living object began to quickly decompose. However, Ryan was agile enough to dodge the scarecrow's attack. Instead of defeating Ryan, the scarecrow hit the nearest trees with his technique, which immediately withered and rotted, and their leaves fell to the ground and turned to dust. After this, the scarecrow prepared to use the Rotting Wood Symphony skill, which had more destructive power. When the scarecrow used its skill, Ryan tried to concentrate all her fighting energy to deflect the scarecrow's blow. While Ryan fought off the scarecrow's attack, she told him that in her county there is an old tradition in which people pull out weeds to show their respect to their ancestors. Ryan also said that despite how old this custom was, people still follow it. After that, Ryan combined her combat energy with the skill of an invincible blade. Meanwhile, Yuhan, along with Count Werdo and Rain, set out to find Begimos. Rain told Count Werdo that the spirits don't like it when someone cuts the grass, to which Count Werdo said that he was just clearing the way especially for Yuhan. However, Yuhan told Count Werdo that it was not worth clearing the road, and Yuhan told Count Werdo to walk behind him in walking lunges. Suddenly Yuhan noticed that they were just walking in a circle, and he decided to ask Rain if they were going in the right direction. Then Rain told Yuhan that the paths of the spirits were very different from the usual paths, and that they just needed to be patient. Soon, Rain said that they had reached the right place, to which Yuhan said that the grass in this place was soft enough to perform jump squats. Latex breath to enter the spirit world, Yuhan told everyone else to start doing jump squats 20 times. At this moment, Rain began the countdown, and with every second her latex breathing became more and more intense. During the exacerbation of Late's breathing, Rain began to feel how birds chirped, how the leaves of trees rustled, and how flowers trembled as their buds bloomed. Suddenly a mysterious distortion appeared in the air, which was a portal to the world of spirits. With each passing second, the portal to the spirit world became larger, and Rain was already preparing to go through the portal. Meanwhile, Count Weirdo and the ghouls finished doing jump squats, and after the last squat, the Count counted the number of repetitions louder than anyone else. At this moment, Yuhan reminded everyone that before the training began, he agreed with the ghouls and Count Weirdo that no one should shout so loudly. Then Yuhan told everyone that because of the unacceptable behavior of Count Weirdo, everyone must perform jumping squats 40 more times. At this moment, Rain had already managed to pass through the portal to the spirit world, and then she grabbed Yuhan so that he would also end up in the spirit world. As soon as Yuhan and Rain passed through the portal, they began to fall quickly, and Rain told Yuhan that he should just surrender to the wind. During the fall, Rain told Yuhan that they are now in the world of Mother Gaia, which is the habitat of various spirits. The ghouls and Count Weirdo also jumped into the portal, and during the fall the ghouls could not get enough of the beauty of the world of Gaia. However, within a second, the ghouls began to fall to the ground faster, and soon they landed on one of the banks. When the ghouls landed on the ground, they noticed that in this world the force of gravity was several times stronger than in their world. At this moment, Yuhan stood lightly on the ground, and he told the ghouls that thanks to the gravity in this world, they could perform squats more efficiently. Yuhan also thought that the laws of this world, such as strong gravity, could easily be used for other exercises. Golems coming towards them. At that same second, one of the golems approached Yuhan and prepared to attack him. Golem's blow was so strong that this blow provoked a real earthquake. However, Yuhan was strong enough to interrupt the golem's blow and begin to hold his fist. The ghouls were surprised that Yuhan was able to survive being hit by the golem, and they decided that they must definitely help Yuhan. However, at this moment, the other golems also prepared to attack Yuhan. The force of the golem's blows was so great that under the influence of their blows, Yuhan was half buried in the ground. At this moment, not only did Yuhan not feel the pain of the golem's blows, but he even began to experience some pleasure from the gradual increase in the load on his muscles. Due to the lack of space to strike, the golems had to fall on their comrades to increase the burden on Yuhan. Golems with each passing second, and the ghouls already thought that Yuhan would definitely not be able to survive under such weight. At this moment, the earthquake was getting stronger, and Blog told everyone to run for cover, as he believed that this earthquake was caused by the call of Yuhan's muscles. At this moment, the ghouls saw Yuhan increase in size several times, and Yuhan ordered the old ghoul lord to increase the weight of the golems he was holding on his shoulders. The old ghoul lord immediately complied with Yuhan's request, and then Yuhan began to leisurely do squats. When Rain wanted to know what Yuhan was doing, one of the ghouls told her that Yuhan had to train his legs today. Rain still didn't understand why Yuhan was doing this, so Blog explained to Rain that today Yuhan should do strength exercises that were aimed at strengthening Yuhan's lower body. At this moment, everyone who arrived in the spirit world heard a mysterious voice coming from the volcano. The mysterious voice said that his name was Bejimos, who is the master of the spirit world, and he wanted to find out for what purpose the guests from another world came to his world. At this moment, Yuhan had just finished squatting, after which he immediately threw the mountain of golems with which he was squatting. After squats, Yuhan headed towards the sea, while Bejimos tried to understand who the guests from another world were. A second later, Yuhan entered the water, began to rinse off and drink water directly from the sea. While Yuhan drank water from the sea, Bejimos did not stop asking Yuhan and his partners who they were and why they came here. Instead of finally answering Bejimos, Yuhan told his teammates that water balance plays an extremely important role in metabolism and the muscle growth process. Yuhan also said that sea water is not suitable for replenishing water balance due to its high sodium content, but the water in this sea was soft and gentle. The ghouls thought that if they drank more water, their muscles would grow faster, and then the ghouls immediately ran to the sea. After a couple of seconds, almost all the ghouls entered the sea and began to drink water, while Begimos still wanted to know who these strangers were. After a few seconds, Yuhan rinsed off and drank some more water from the sea, and after that, he was ready to talk to Begimos. However, the behavior of Yuhan and his ghouls greatly angered Begimos, from which he concluded that Yuhan and his ghouls were simply arrogant and ill-mannered barbarians. Begimos was so angry with Yuhan and his ghouls that he immediately sent another group of his golems at them. Begimos also created very large and solid walls, from which a large and intricate labyrinth began to form. Then Begimos told Yuhan that his labyrinth was so complex and confusing that no one could get out of it without the help of spirits. In addition to the fact that the labyrinth is constantly changing, there were a lot of huge stone golems in it, which were just waiting for the moment when someone would stumble upon them. While Begimos told Yuhan and his team about his labyrinth, Rain believed that thanks to her latex skills, she could easily navigate this labyrinth. At that moment, Rain concentrated her strength and made a very high jump, thanks to which she could easily skip the passage of the mysterious labyrinth. However, immediately after the jump, Rain immediately began to rapidly fall to the ground. Then Rain realized that she could not easily overcome this labyrinth by trying to jump over it. Meanwhile, several ghouls began to try to put pressure on the wall with their walls, hoping that they could simply break the walls of the labyrinth. Soon, the rest of the ghouls also began to try to break through the walls of the labyrinth, trying to find a weak point in one of the walls. At that moment, Begimos told the ghouls that no forces could break through these walls, but the ghouls did not stop trying to break through the walls of the labyrinth. After a few seconds, Yuhan still managed to make a large hole in one of the walls of the labyrinth. After a few more seconds, Blog also managed to make another hole in one of the walls. After that, Blog suggested that all the ghouls start destroying the walls in the places where he and Yuhan had already made holes. The ghouls immediately began to destroy the walls, starting with the holes that Blog and Yuhan had already made, and further destruction of the walls of the labyrinth became many times more effective. However, despite the fact that the labyrinth was now almost completely demolished, the ghouls still did not understand what to do with the golems. At this moment, Rain immediately used her combat energy paired with her sharp word skill to defeat one of the golems. After the attack, Rain told the ghouls that the eyes of golems are their weak point, and if you attack a golem directly in the eye, it will immediately lose all its vital energy. After this, the ghouls immediately began to jump on their heads and hit them right in the eyes, after which the golems immediately fell to the ground. Begimos was so angry with Yuhan and his partners for dishonestly traversing his labyrinth that the volcano from which Begimos' voice came immediately began to erupt. Despite the sudden eruption of the volcano, Yuhan and his group managed to reach the volcano without loss, and they saw a very large and heavy object to which a cable was tied. The spirits told Rain that if they managed to lift this object, then they could meet Begimos. At first, Yuhan wanted to try to destroy this object, but one of the ghouls suggested that Yuhan look where the cable that was tied to this object led. As soon as Yuhan took a closer look at the rope, he saw that it passed through several weight-lifting blocks. At the other end of the rope, Yuhan saw a pulley machine he was familiar with. Yuhan really missed the world in which he was still a famous bodybuilder, but he very carefully hid his homesickness from his partners. Yuhan was so happy to see the familiar simulator from his world that he began to cry. The first upper block simulators appeared back in the 60s of the 20th century, and this simulator was invented by the American sports trainer Andrew Memel. Andrew Memel got the idea for the lat pull-down machine during a workout where he was doing a very similar exercise to the lat pull-down. Soon, Andrew created a lat pull-down machine that made back exercises much more effective and safer. Since then, many varieties of overhead pull-down machines have appeared, which differ in design and operating mechanism. At one point, Yuhan stopped crying, because he believed that tears negatively affect muscle development. The ghouls didn't understand what Yuhan was talking about, so they asked him to explain what kind of simulator this was. Count Werdo wanted to escape unnoticed, as he was afraid that this simulator was some kind of trap, but Rain immediately grabbed the Count and did not let him leave. However, the happy Yuhan calmed everyone down and said that this simulator is not a trap. Before sitting down at the exercise machine, Yuhan asked the ghouls to list the exercises they performed on their backs. The ghouls then listed several exercises, such as pull-ups, barbell lifts, and one-arm dumbbell lifts. Yuhan then told the ghouls that during these exercises, they persistently helped each other, while people were forced to train alone. Yuhan also told the ghouls that it was precisely for such people who train alone that such a simulator, as the overhead pulley simulator was invented. Yuhan told the ghouls that the exercises on the lat pull-down machine are very similar to pull-ups. But on this machine you can choose the weight and adjust the load on the muscles. During exercises on the lat pull-down machine, the scapular and oblique muscles of the back are pumped. But if concentration is impaired, the shoulders and forearms will sway. Yuhan also suggested that the ghouls try to do the exercise on this simulator, and the ghouls happily agreed. Before you start the exercise, you must fix the bench so that your body remains in the same position during the exercise. After fixing the simulator, you need to grab the simulator so that the position of your hands is slightly wider than your shoulders. After this, the person must pull the weight of the machine towards himself so that the oblique muscles of the back are activated during the exercise. Also, during the exercise, you cannot change the position of your body and do not tilt your body back. At this moment, Yuhan felt that the weight on this machine was set too high, and he told the ghouls that he would first lift the weight, after which the ghouls would come down. As soon as Yuhan began to perform the exercise, the very object to which the cable was attached was lifted without any problem. While everyone was climbing up the pipe, Count Werdo asked the old ghoul lord why Yuhan was doing this exercise if Yuhan planned to train only his legs today. Then the old ghoul lord told Count Werdo that Yuhan's body was very different from that of an ordinary person. Despite this, Count Werdo did not understand how Yuhan could go down with them if he kept this pipe open. At this moment, the old ghoul lord was seriously thinking about Count Werdo's words, and he believed that he urgently needed to figure out how to let Yuhan go down the pipe with the others. Soon, Yuhan finished doing the exercise, and he said that he would soon be able to go with them. Meanwhile, the old ghoul lord used weight reduction while the rest of the ghouls held the passage open so that Yuhan could pass along with the rest of his companions. While Yuhan was heading towards the passage, he noticed that the muscles and maximum weight of the ghouls had become much larger, after which they all descended into the mysterious passage. As soon as Yuhan and his partners walked down the passage, they saw many small hamsters working in some kind of factory. Rain immediately began to be touched by what she saw, and she really wanted to touch these hamsters. However, Yuhan told Rain that before she started training at the gym, she should definitely contact the director or another employee of the gym. At this moment, Yuhan heard a familiar voice saying that Yuhan and his partners really shouldn't touch anything here. At that moment, Yuhan saw a small snow-white puppy in front of him, who declared that they were the same Begimos who was the master of this world. Count Werdo could not believe that this cute dog was Begimos, while the old ghoul lord noticed that this dog had the same big belly as him. The words of the old ghoul lord greatly angered the little dog, and he immediately began to threaten the old ghoul lord with cruel punishment. At that moment, a cat in a lab coat appeared behind the dog and threw a small ball at the dog's head, and she said that she was very interested in following the developments. At that moment, the dog made an offended face and squatted down, and the cat said that this cute dog's name is Ren, and he is the supreme spirit of the earth. After that, the cat with a smile on her face told Yuhan and his partner that she was the very Begimos they were looking for. Begimos also told Yuhan and his partners that the rest of the workers of this plant are also supreme spirits, and therefore Yuhan and his partners should not treat them like animals. At this moment, Yuhan and his companions looked at Begimos and tried to understand how a cat, a small dog and hamsters could be the supreme spirits of the earth. After that, Begimos said that thanks to Ren's tests, they were able to evaluate the abilities of Yuhan's group, after which she asked Yuhan why they came to the spirit world. Then Yuhan told Begimos that they came to this world because of her, and then Yuhan asked Begimos if she could make him training equipment. Then Begimos told Yuhan that if she had time and materials, she could make mechanisms for training, which she called simulators. Yuhan already wanted to thank Begimos for her help, but Count Werdo told Yuhan that decent people don't negotiate like that. After this, Count Werdo bowed to Begimos, greeted her, and introduced himself. After this, Count Werdo asked Begimos how Yuhan's group could repay her for her help. Begimos was somewhat surprised by Count Werdo's politeness, and she began to think about how Yuhan's group could thank her. After a minute of thought, Begimos told Count Werdo that the spirits of her world do not accept goods from creatures of the middle world as payment. Then Count Werdo told Begimos that he would fulfill any of her requests, just to repay her for her help. Then Begimos said that recently a villain had appeared in the middle world and was polluting the earth. Begimos has already repeatedly sent her assistants to the middle world to get rid of the scoundrel, but everyone she sent has gone missing. Then Begimos said that if Yuhan and his group could get rid of this scoundrel, then she would definitely give Yuhan all the training equipment he needed. Yuhan agreed to these terms, but Count Werdo wanted to know if they would have anyone as a guide. Bejimos said that she had only sent mid-level spirits on this mission before, but now she was interested in seeing what Yuhan and his group were capable of. Bejimos then decided to send Ren along with Yuhan and his group, since he was one of the high-level spirits. Ren was very scared to go to the middle world, and he told Bejimos that he could not go with Yuhan since he was responsible for maintaining the workplace of all the spirits. However, Bejimos knew that all Ren really did was sleep around the clock and eat dog food. Meanwhile, Ryan disturbed several more monsters that lived in the area where she fought with the scarecrow. At this moment, various monsters, such as clowns and witches, began to run after Ryan. Suddenly, Ryan ran far enough to try to attack the monsters that attacked her. Ryan's attack was so fast and strong that the monsters that were chasing her immediately flew high into the sky. At the same moment, Ryan stopped and prepared to combine her combat energy with the skill of piercing blades. Ryan's skill was so precise and deadly that the swords that were created during this skill would hit a flying fly without any problem. Soon a huge number of magical blades appeared in the sky, which were aimed at Ryan's enemies. There were so many magical swords that the monsters that attacked Ryan would not have enough time to run away or take cover from Ryan's attack. Despite the fact that Ryan easily got rid of her enemies, she was greatly disappointed that she was not able to take what she came for. Meanwhile, Ren still went with Yuhan's group, and the first thing he was going to do was eat one piece of the local ore. While Yuhan was training, Ren explained to him that spirits like him could easily read the memories of the land after they ate a piece of ore that formed in these lands. As soon as Ren tasted one of the ores, his eyes became several times larger, and Yuhan believed that Ren had actually seen something. However, Ren only wagged his tail and told Yuhan that he had never tasted such delicious ore in his life. After that, Ren said that this ore was too young, and this ore had short memories. Ren then told Yuhan and his group that if they could get him very old stones, he would be able to see even more memories. After a couple of minutes, the ghouls gathered and began looking for old enough stones for Ren. Suddenly a couple of ghouls found one large and round stone, and they decided to bring this particular stone to Ren. The ghouls were trying to pick up the stone they found, and at that moment Yuhan approached them to find out what they were going to do. Then the ghouls told Yukan that they were going to dig up this stone to bring it to Ren. Then Yuhan ordered the ghouls to step aside to show them how they could pull out this stone even more efficiently. Yuhan then knelt down and placed one hand on the ground while he stabbed his other hand into the stone, creating several holes in it for an easier grip. After this, the stone became like a small weight that Yuhan and the ghouls could easily pull out of the pit. However, instead of pulling out the stone and taking it to Rin, Yuhan immediately began doing exercises with her. While Yuhan was doing the exercise, Blog wanted to show Yuhan how he could lift such heavy stones. After a couple of seconds, Blog easily lifted a very heavy stone above his head and began to squat with it. After a few squats, Blog threw a heavy rock, causing a very loud noise in the area. After that, Yuhan praised Blog and told him that Blog was now holding his pose even more confidently. Meanwhile, the rest of the ghouls also began to perform various exercises using heavy stones. At this moment, Run looked at how Yuhan and his ghouls were training, and thought that they had completely forgotten about his request. A few minutes later, Yuhan finally gave Rin a piece of the required stone so that Rin could try to see his memories. A second after being bitten, Rin saw the memories of this stone, and he saw a strange cave in front of him. In this cave was a large creature named Cork, who was half human, half amphibian, and who also invented the alcoholic drink whiskey. On this day, an unknown monster arrived at Cork, who reminded Cork that if he did not enter the Oculus, he would take away Cork's right to live in this cave. The fact is that Cork offered the master whiskey as a gift, but this monster believed that Cork wanted to poison his master. Then Cork told the monster that he would like to join Oculus, but he was somewhat dissatisfied with the conditions of his entry. Cork also wanted to prove to the monster that his whiskey was not poison, after which Cork ordered some of his assistants to grab the monster and give him whiskey to drink. Soon the monster became drunk on Cork's whiskey, and Cork decided that now he could conduct a dialogue with this monster. After this, Cork summoned all the members of the Military Order of Redhead, in which Cork was the leader, and announced the beginning of the meeting. At this point, the Or's memories were interrupted, and Ren wanted to inform Yuhan about what he had learned. However, at this point, Yuhan and his ghouls continued their training, and then Rin called Yuhan and his ghouls savages. After training, the first ghoul noticed that one of his teammates had noticeably enlarged his oblique muscles. Then this ghoul said that his muscles were forming very quickly, and he noticed that his partner began to lift even greater weights. Then the first ghoul told his friend that weights are indeed the most effective way to build muscle. The second ghoul could not agree with his friend's opinion, and he believed that impact was much more important than weight. However, the first ghoul was absolutely sure that weight plays an important role in muscle growth. At this point, an argument arose between two friends about what was more important, weight or impact. At this moment, one of the ghouls offered to fight in a fair fight to find out for sure what is more important for pumping muscles. The second ghoul said that he also wanted to find out what was more important, after which he accepted his friend's challenge to fight. At this moment, the rest of the ghouls were watching these ghouls quarrel. Meanwhile, these ghouls have already prepared for a bodybuilding match, during which they will stand in various poses while the judge evaluates them. The judges felt that the weight made the obliques appear larger, while the impact made the same muscles look trimmer. The first pose was a front double biceps, and despite the difference, both ghouls looked pretty toned. The second pose was showing the latissimus dorsi muscles from the front, and this time there was a little less difference. Before the judge could tell the ghouls to stand in the third position, Yuhan suddenly appeared, wanting to find out what was going on here. At this moment, Yuhan was very angry with the ghouls, as he was not happy with the fact that instead of training, the ghouls were doing some nonsense. Yuhan then told the ghouls that instead of figuring out what was more important, weight or impact, they would rather focus their energy on training and taking breaks. Despite Yuhan's anger, the ghouls still wanted to know what is actually more important for pumping up muscles, weight or impact. Then the ghouls decided to ask Yuhan this, so that he would give them an accurate answer and explain everything to them. However, instead of answering the ghouls' question, Yuhan asked the ghouls what is more important to them: a barbell or dumbbells, the back or front muscles of the thighs, the chest muscles or the back muscles. At that moment, Count Werdo understood what Yuhan meant with his questions, but he did not understand why he did not ask the ghouls who was more important to them, mom or dad. However, the old ghoul lord asked Count Werdo to speak a little more quietly, since Yuhan had very good hearing and might accidentally hear the count's words. Then Yuhan told the ghouls that they should not think about such things, since along with the increase in weight, the impact may increase. Then Yuhan suggested that everyone complete the ghoul training and start a new training, and the ghouls happily agreed with Yuhan's proposal. This time, Yuhan again managed to convince his partners that he would definitely make every effort to help them become better. While the ghouls were getting ready to start a new training, Rin was eating and thinking about when Yuhan and his group would join the task. Meanwhile, the blog wanders through the woods looking for slugs to make into training bands that will help him pump up his accessory muscles. The blog couldn't forget Rain's words that his attacks were too slow to defeat her. After some time, the blog was still able to find a slug from which to make a training tape. At this moment, Blog was already attacking the slug as quickly as possible so that he would not have time to escape from him. However, when Blog almost caught the slug, he noticed that the slug had disappeared somewhere. A couple of seconds later, Blog saw some strange animal sitting on a tree and holding his slug in his hands. At that moment, the big frog who was sitting on the tree apologized to the Blog and said that slugs can be used to make excellent booze. However, the frog did not understand why a person suddenly needed a slug, and he decided to ask the Blog. Then the Blog explained to the frog that slugs can be used to make exercise equipment that helps one become stronger. Then the frog told Blog that his mentor could easily make Blog stronger. After this, the frog invited Blog to go with him to his mentor so that he could help Blog become even stronger. However, Blog refused such an offer, citing the fact that he already has a mentor who is probably already waiting for him. As a result, Blog went with the frog to his mentor, where he immediately got Blog drunk. The frogs were amazed that Blog drank so much booze so easily, and they decided that Blog had been drinking for a long time. However, drunk Blog said that it was his first time trying alcohol, after which he asked the frogs when he would get stronger. Then one of the frogs told Blog that he had already become very strong, and the more he drank, the stronger he would become. The frogs wanted to pour Blog more drinks, but at that moment Blog simply couldn't stand it and fell to the floor. When Blog fell unconscious on the floor, the frogs said that Blog would have to pay a lot for the drink. Soon Blog began to wake up, and with every second he became more and more thirsty. At that moment, Blog was in a very large cave, to the walls of which were attached a lot of people like Blog, who were drunk by frogs. The Blog remembered that he had to return to Yuhan as soon as possible, and then he began to try to get out of the trap. However, the substance that was holding Blog back was too sticky and elastic for Blog to get out on his own. At that moment, Blog heard someone tell him that if Blog wanted to live, then he should stop twitching. This was the same lizard who commanded a group of lizards who once attacked a ghoul settlement, and he said that no one had ever managed to get out of the toad food warehouse. However, the Blog did not listen to the lizard, and he continued to try to get out, and this began to make the lizard very angry. However, the lizard remembered that there was no point in trying to stop Blog, since very soon they would die anyway. After that, the Blog stopped twitching, and he asked the lizard why the frogs didn't kill them right away. Then the lizard told the Blog that the frogs were doing this in order to create some kind of dungeon. A dungeon is any place from which new monsters appear and subsequently attack people. However, monsters cannot spawn indefinitely, and special life energy is required to spawn new monsters. The principle of the dungeon is that it sucks the life energy from living beings and redirects it to create various monsters. Before using vital energy, you need to create and maintain a core in which all the energy of living beings will be stored. That is why frogs fill their warehouses with various living creatures, so that they can then suck all the energy out of them and make them part of the dungeon. Then Blog wanted to try to find a way to get out of this warehouse alive and return back to the surface. However, the lizard pointed out to Blog one of the dried skeletons, and said that no one had ever managed to escape from the dungeon. The lizard also told the Blog that the more he moves in an attempt to get out of here, the faster he will lose his vital energy. At this point, Blog began to blame himself for not being strong enough to get out of this trap. At this point, Blog began to apologize to Yuhan for not being able to return to them. As soon as the lizard heard the name of Yuhan, he immediately got scared, and believed that Yuhan would arrive here very soon. At this moment, the lizard became very scared, and he began to try to get out of the trap. Blog looked at the frightened lizard and could not understand why he was twitching so much, if he himself said that in this way he would only lose his vital energy faster. At this moment, the lizard with pain in his soul recalled the very day when his team failed in an attempt to capture the ghoul settlement, after which Yuhan used them for group training. The lizard then told Blog that no matter what he did, he would still die there because of the dungeon or because of Yuhan. Meanwhile, Yuhan was trying to understand where Blog was now and why he had not returned yet. Then the old ghoul lord explained to Yuhan that Blog forgot to take his training ribbon with him, and he went into the forest to make himself a new ribbon. Then Yuhan thought that Blog could ask him to give him a new training tape, since Yuhan always had a spare tape with him. At this point, Rain found it strange that the Blog never returned to them, which made her start to worry. However, Yuhan was completely calm about Blog, as he was confident that Blog was strong enough to survive on his own in the wild. However, Count Werdo felt that they were now on enemy soil, and that they should be more concerned that a member of their group had never made it back. A second later, Yuhan handed over a large round stone to Count Werdo, and the Count found it very difficult to hold it. After this, Yuhan told Count Werdo that if the current calm was bothering him, he could start doing squats. Count Werdo greatly regretted his concern, and then the Count began to squat with this heavy cobblestone. While Count Werdo was crouching with a cobblestone on his shoulders, Ren informed Yuhan that they must find Cork, who is going to turn this place into a dungeon. Ren also told Yuhan that they should not use their power in this place, since the dungeon can absorb the powers of living beings. While Ren was talking about Cork, Yuhan only thought that frog legs contain a lot of protein, which is necessary for muscle growth. Then the ghouls decided that the faster they dealt with Cork and his assistants, they would be able to get a lot of protein. The ghouls wanted to find Cork in his dungeon as quickly as possible, and they decided to ask Ren where Cork's lair was. However, Ren said that he could not tell the exact location of Cork. However, he said that Cork is in something that looks like a cave. Then the ghouls suggested that Yuhan divide into groups and go in search of Cork, after which the group that finds Cork will give a signal to all other groups with their pectoral muscles. At this point, Yuhan felt that he and his ghouls should not spend so much time on aerobic exercise. At this point, Count Werdo told Yuhan that he could easily find anything, and then he invited Yuhan to join them in their search for Cork. Before Count Werdo went to search for Cork, Yuhan wanted to make sure that the Count had done 100 squats, but the Count said that he had not finished doing squats yet. Yuhan then told Count Werdo that he could join the search for Cork after he completed 100 squats. At this moment, Count Werdo became even more offended that he not only failed to avoid squats, but would also have to look for Cork. At this moment, one of the frogs was heading towards the dungeon with a very large bag. When the frog arrived at the entrance to the dungeon, the guard frog allowed the frog with the bag to approach the vessel in which the life energy of the victims of the dungeon was stored. After this, the frog began to pour something out of its bag into the vessel with vital energy. Meanwhile, messengers awakened in the dungeon, which were very large larvae.